customers are very important to us. Please hold on, and our program will begin shortly. The Soundcheck podcast is coming up. Please continue to hold. Keep up with the Soundcheck podcast and everything that's happening in the New Sounds empire. Just go to newsounds.org and follow us on social media. All of the icons are in the top right corner of the page. All of our other musicians are currently playing for other customers. Please stay with us, and someone will play for you in just a moment. From newsounds.org and the studios of WNYC in New York, welcome to another live performance in our Soundcheck podcast series. Streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, I'm John Schaefer. The Brooklyn-based Afrobeat ensemble called Antibalas is celebrating 20 years of playing West African-style funk with New York attitude, and they're celebrating by releasing their 8th album. It's called Chronicles, and it brings 11 members of the ensemble to our now very crowded studio, and it's a pleasure to welcome back Martine Perna, the baritone sax player who you founded this group, got to be over 20 years ago now, right?
Hey, John, thanks for having us.
Yeah. So Chronicles is kind of a history lesson, isn't it?
It is a history lesson. It is songs, I'd like Ameno to speak on that, but it's definitely stuff that has been seasoning and fermenting like wine in a cask that's finally ready to pop that bottle and share with the world.
Duke Ameno is Antibalas' lead singer and keyboard player. And so, Duke, set up for us, if you will. I mean, normally we have 3 kind of short songs. You guys are going to do 2 songs and really stretch out, because that's how this music needs to be heard. The first piece, called Fight Finish, is like it's a song in 3 rounds, like a boxing match.
Exactly. Like an amateur fight, like the one that you have with yourself when you wake up in the morning. Should I get up or should I stay in bed? Right brain, left brain,
Right.
So it kind of expands into.
And the idea of fighting, of martial arts. I mean, this band actually literally started in your Kung Fu dojo in Brooklyn, right?
Correct, in Williamsburg, pre-gentrified Williamsburg days.
Old school Brooklyn, before Brooklyn was a brand.
Exactly.
Back when
Before Brooklyn became Dubai.
All right, so this is a piece called Fight Finish. It's on the new record called Chronicles. Let's hear a live performance. This is the band Antibalas.
must address the no, oh no, no, oh no, rock, going, no, oh no, for I, no, oh no, ben, no, oh no, ben, no, oh no, no, oh no, rules are rules, no, oh no, no exception. Round two. wake us. Wake up, wake up. Studio heads, all go home. Let's count and wake him up. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Fight 'em Finish is the name of the song. Anti-Balas is the name of the band, and you'll find it on their new album called Foo Chronicles, 8th LP from the Brooklyn-based Afrobeat band. You've met Martin Perna before, playing the sax, Duke Amayo on vocals and keyboards. Let me introduce you to the rest of the band. Lynn Ligamari playing on tenor sax. The two trumpeters are Jordan McLean and Jackie Coleman. The rhythm section, Rinaldo de Jesus playing congas, Marcus Farrar playing the shekere, and behind our drum kit in the corner is Kevin Raska. On guitars, we have Marcos Garcia and Timothy James, and on bass, Justin Kimmel. So, Duke fanning himself over there in the studio, having worked up a sweat.
Yes.
3 rounds of song singing already. Tell me how you came to America to found a dojo and then find yourself in fronting a band.
Yeah, it's one of those, dreams that you follow a dream, And
Yeah.
I was young, and my dream was sparked during Festac in Lagos, Nigeria. So I followed the groove, those guys that came, all the people from all the African diaspora, musicians and artists and dancers that came to Lagos. I wanted more of that. But I didn't know how to get that. So, let me start from, the United States of America, So I ended up in New York, and the rest is history. But, the things I was studying martial arts in Nigeria before I came.
Okay.
So it was always like in the back of my mind, I need to find a place to kind of ground myself in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
So everywhere I came, or at least everywhere that I went to, or the schools that I went to, I would seek out martial arts. And then I would register myself, and then that was always part of my,
And do you find there's a kind of a common ground between music and the martial arts?
Yes. As a matter of fact, every walk of life shares a common ground with Kung Fu, because Kung Fu is about excellence in all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
So wherever you find yourself, try to use Kung Fu as part of your ritual, to.
So not just a physical practice then,
No,
but a
it's
mental one.
Mental.
Yeah. And Martine, how did you? I mean, did you first meet Amayo because you wanted to learn Kung Fu? I mean, how did the band end up there?
I had lived in Williamsburg since '94, and Gabe Roth, who was one of my college roommates and
Gabe
best
is
friends, the head of Daptone Records.
Daptone Records.
We lived down the block from each other, and we went out for a Sunday walk, and decided to pass by this dojo that we had seen, a fashion show that had Nigerian drummers. I'm like, wow, the Antibalas was off the ground. We were doing a gig coming up in the neighborhood, and we're just like, let's go see if that guy's around, give him a heads up, check out the space, And when we got there, he and another friend, Ogugwa Iwelo, were, it was open, and we were listening to Fela, and we just started talking, and then Amayo came around to the show, a couple shows, and then we had a show way back at the Cooler, rest in peace, on 14th Street, where a percussionist dipped. And I was like, called Amayo, I was like, you've seen us a couple times. You think you want to sit in and rock with us? Hold down some percussion?
Did you know he could play?
No. I mean, I know he had a musical background, but he wasn't currently actively in some bands. But it was like Shakere. It wasn't a lead role, and then we had all these instrumentals, and he started writing some really beautiful vocal melodies and stuff to them, and it was a very, very organic process.
Right. Now, you mentioned Fela, who, of course, is the late, great Nigerian band leader, Fela Kuti, and whose music was important not just for starting the whole Afrobeat thing, but also, Duke, it was very political, a very socially conscious music, and made a lot of statements. And that's something that, Martin seems to have had in mind for this band from the beginning, but which you have made explicit in a lot of your songwriting.
I lived around it. It was like literally a block from my house. So you are either ostracized, grounded, or casted out if you go to Fela's club. So his club was open air. It's now the computer village, incidentally. But that was my neighborhood. At least that's my neighborhood. So I was always around that, but did not experience it from the inside. So it was kind of nice to now be on the inside of it, to now experience it from a writing perspective. So I was always observing from a listener, a participator, a dancer, and martial artist, because it was martial arts. Like when I go see Fela, I saw him as my Sifu. Like, so everyone else was watching Fela, but I was looking at my Sifu. So I had a different kind of mindset then. So I was, it was important for me to combine that kind of lifestyle with everything I did. So it was a natural. When music came,
Right. Yeah. So he was your Sifu, your teacher in Lagos.
In Lagos, yeah. Like in terms of like.
But then you became the Sifu. You had to go to New York.
Exactly.
You had to cross an ocean and go to another country.
Yeah. That's another story, actually. So.
All right. So this new record, Martin, I mentioned Chronicles is the name of it, and it kind of looks back to those earliest days of you guys getting together in the dojo. It would be an easy question and probably a boring answer to say what has changed since then, because everything in Williamsburg is different. What hasn't changed? What's constant? What remains?
The pollution.
Street names.
Keeping it real. Got to keep it 100. The traffic. The waterfront is still there, although you can't see it. I think there's definitely a spirit. There's there's schools like we. Ameno, myself, a couple of other older members taught at a beautiful school called El Puente Academy for Peace and Justice. That's evolved. That's still there. We see a lot of people, students that are now like are taller than me, have mustaches and babies, and that I knew when they were 14. So there's still, it's not like everybody left.
Right.
And after spending a couple years outside of that neighborhood, Amayo is back on the same street.
I'm there.
4 blocks away from where Gabe and I lived when we met, like 20 years
There's probably
ago.
like maybe 4 of us left in that area. People that were there when we were all there. They're still there. We like the holdouts,
But is the dojo still there?
There's no dojo there. That place is now a grocery store.
Yeah, the building got destroyed and then rebuilt.
Yeah, the building got built up. But there's another spot, just another block down, that I do my kung fu now. So it's like so I'm back.
So you're still teaching.
I just started again. So I'm back there. It's called Overthrow Brooklyn. It's like a nice gym. You go in there, you punch away. Punch away and sweat.
Right. Well, that was. Although Fela may not have used those exact techniques, he was all about overthrowing, upsetting the natural order of things.
Yeah.
A lot of your singing is in Nigerian English, Nigerian Standard English,
broken English, Yoruba,
and Pidgin,
Edo.
Yeah.
I'm starting to bring other languages and like there's a little bit of Hausa in it now. So I'm trying to express what Nigeria was supposed to be, like one nation under a flag, right?
Right.
Made up of all this. So I'm figuring out like how to sing about our unity, because there's a huge divide going on. Like it's happening here, it's happening everywhere. So it's kind of like it has all this, deeper meanings to like engage in Nigerian youth. Because it's an important time, for them to be fully engaged.
Well, now the title of the next song, Ameno, what language is that?
That's Edo.
That's Edo, and
where I'm from, yeah.
And
Benin
that was
City.
your mom's middle name, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And if we look at the cover of Chronicles, the new album by Antibalas, who is that on the cover?
looks like my mom. And it's a lookalike of my mom, you know. I didn't want to make it too specific. I wanted to kind of like represent mothers, you know.
Right.
Like, she's like, live with a lady, you know.
And what is Foo? What does Foo mean?
It's an acronym for Foo Orchestra. It's, like
Your other...
my other project, which is, it's like a bubble up and write song and it's end up here in Antibalas. So Foo Orchestra, I mean, most of the members of Antibalas, the old members, have all played and has all been participant in my experimentation of where Kung Fu meets Afrobeat. So
yeah,
this is like
similar to the way Martin, so many of Anti-Balas and the Dap Kings have overlapped over the years.
It's a Parliament Funkadelic kind of a thing.
Big community,
there's different projects that are like the same musicians but have a kind of an aesthetic bent that makes one distinctly different from the others, even though there's a lot of the same talent and spirit on there. So it's exciting. I mean, 20 years ago, when I remember recruiting people for the first version, what became the Dap Kings, and it was really hard. And now, 20 years later, there's musicians coming from all over the world, like beating down our collective doors, like, we want to be in your band. When like 20 years ago, it was like, wow, who wants to play funk? Or the kind of funk that we want to play, or Afrobeat, and it was very few people. So it's exciting that there's a community and there's so much work, and then bands, doing inspired by us or going deeper into the roots that are happening.
That's when
all
you
over
know
the
you're
country.
getting old, when the
world.
next generation comes along and they tell you, yeah, I've been listening to you since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reality check.
You never get used to that. The band is Antibalas, and they are here with us in the studio today. They have 2 gigs here in New York, and appropriately, they're in Brooklyn, March 20th and March 21st at Brooklyn Bowl, part of their tour around the country. But right now, they're here in the studio, and they're going to play this piece for us called Ameno.
Oh, just walk by the oh, shake my mouth. Oh, the door, the thing I love, shall see your shoe. Oh, la, look big better, look big better. Ashiri duo, ashiri duo, ashiri duo, ashiri duo, ashiri duo, ashiri duo. Translation, brothers and sisters. All the lies and bad intention you've been hiding has one destination. Triple exposure. Triple exposure. Goddess. Triple exposure. That's us holy water. Oh. Triple exposure. Wash away all pollution. Triple exposure. Exposure of bad intent. Zara, Amere. Oh, Zara, soldier boy. I'm back to, oh, 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 oh. Amen, 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 pass you by, no. Amen, amen, amen. May the water God bring not pass you by. Amen, amen, amen. Not pass you by. Amen, amen, amen. Amen, amen. Amen, 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 whoa. Lady, what's up? You got me. Not pass you by, no. Amen, 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 amen.
Once again, the band Antibalas performing live here in our studio in a song called Ameno, which you will find on their brand new album called Chronicles. And before you guys head off on tour, I mean, was the making of this record, Martine, a little exercise in nostalgia for you, looking back over 20 years? And
It was in a lot of ways. So we, the past 3 records we made came out on Daptone, but the last one we released, we didn't record there. So this was the first time we were back at the Daptone House of Soul in Bushwick, which is still around, which was built around 2002, 2003, basically when we lost Amayo's Dojo. That was the next home of Daptone, because that was also the home of the first Daptone
oh, so
records.
the record label was
Yeah,
actually in
Sharon
the
at the
dojo,
dojo,
too.
No,
Yeah,
basement, yeah.
a bunch. Sharon's first record was made there. The
Sharon
Buddhas did
Jones and the
stuff,
Dap
Sugarman
Kings,
3.
yeah.
Yeah. So all Gabe's equipment, the control room was in the basement. So we were the first band to record in that studio. We made Who Is This America? Then we made a couple other things. But we hadn't been back there in 6 years. And what was beautiful was that all family came through.
Now, see, when I asked you
Yeah.
before, what stayed it's the same.
And the furniture
people.
stayed
Yeah,
the same.
a lot of the
Instead-
people. Yeah.
You know, the
oh, yeah,
furniture we
Daptone has
had-
stayed the same. Yeah, it's still
The
like,
furniture we used at the Afro spot, and I had this runway because I used to do fashion shows. So my runway is now the control room platform. And,
Yeah.
you know, so we kind of, we stripped that studio.
yeah.
And took all the tools and materials and built the Daptone studio in Bushwick. You know?
Yeah.
So it was like a...
There's a hat rack. The rack right by the door that's covered in like 100 forgotten coats that belonged to my mother. Rest in peace. And I grew up with that in my house. So at a certain point, I got to get that back. Yeah, but that's definitely one of the things that stayed the same, and that's a locus. You know, a lot of,
Right.
fortunately, people have been able to weather the sort of economic storm, and there's enough family, both, current Antibalas and extended family that are here. And, New York is still the people. The buildings look different, the blocks look different, but, as long as the good people stay around, the city's worth it,
Says the man who just moved to Berkeley.
Hey,
We're still here. And you know what?
Hey,
I gotta say though, like those of us who've stayed here, I've figured out like it used to be where I will always point at them, right?
Yeah.
Now it's almost like it's kind of interesting now to kind of flip it. So I'm creating new businesses to remind this new gentrifiers that we were here before. So some of
Right.
us that are still, we're kind of creating this little small pocket. So
Well, and I think
it
that's...
stays the same,
Yeah.
right? So
and I think that, in all seriousness, I think that Martine is right, that, at the end of the day, this is like a community, and Anti-Balas has been part of a larger community that continues to do incredibly good work, and it's gone beyond our little borough of Brooklyn, and you guys are all over the country the next couple of months. Anti-Balas will be back in Brooklyn at Brooklyn Bowl on March 20th and 21st. Chronicles is a new record. Guys, thank you so much for coming in. It's great to see you all
John,
again.
thank you.
thank you for having us.
This is Soundcheck.